Washington's taking their longest road trip of the year, going cross-country to Maryland. It's time for a crossover.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a Locked On College crossover. I'm Tomashoff, the host of Locked On Huskies. That's Tre Moore. He's the host of Locked On Terps. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda, Move and Be Moved. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast on either channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when either of us post a new show on our respective channels. And with that being said, Tre, we've got a phenomenal show coming at all our everydayers today. We're going to play a little game a little bit later on of your team wins if. We're going to throw some names to know at the everydayers. You've got some names that Washington fans need to know about. I've got some for the Maryland fans, but when you look at this game, what is the first thing that you're thinking of?
I think of the quarterback battles. I think about the two QBs. I think a lot of people are honed into these guys. Obviously, Maryland's freshman, Malik Washington, super exciting. And then Williams Jr. at Washington is also an electric quarterback himself. So I think when we look at it, kind of a grander scope and how the rest of the country looks at it when they're talking about this game, I think a lot of people are intrigued about the two quarterbacks. And I definitely think that's kind of the biggest storyline headed into this game is these two quarterbacks. But I think both guys are special. I think both guys are arguably their best players on each team, definitely the most important. So number one thing I think about is a quarterback battle in this game.
So I love where you're going with that, because it's something I was saying a little bit earlier in the week over on Locked On Huskies, is that I feel like Washington and Maryland, with the way they're built right now, they're on very similar trajectories, where Maryland, not just with Malik Washington, but with the pair of freshman edge rushers, it's a very young team that Mike Locksley has put together, which with a lot of upside. And I look at Washington with Demond Williams being the center point of all of it. And yeah, you have some guys who, some superstars that probably won't be around very long. Jonah Coleman being in his final year of eligibility, Denzel Boston probably off to the NFL draft after this year, Tacario Davis being another name. But there are so many other young players that Washington is clearly building around. Wide receivers Desmond Roebuck and Raiden Vinesbright. Cornerback Dylan Robinson, who will probably wind up starting if Tacario Davis is unable to play in this game. There are so many talented players on both sides of this game that are going to make this a lot of fun to look at, because I think that when I look at the number one thing in this game, I love where you're going with the quarterback battle. For me, it comes down to the trenches. Washington was able to somewhat hold their own against Ohio State a week ago, but obviously as that game wore on, the Buckeyes showed why they were the number one team in the country. And I think Washington's offensive line has been tremendous this season. If Carver Willis, their left tackle, is able to suit up, I think that could be a major difference maker in this game, because I like Maryland's front seven. I think they're really talented, but there's also something to be said for the schedule that your team has played so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've talked about it every day on Locked On Terps, is the schedule. We just haven't played anybody of quality. Even the Wisconsin game, I'm kind of, after watching Wisconsin now this year, I'm like, they have a lot of problems themselves. Obviously, that's the best team we've played so far. So there is a sample size of some really special things. And you talk about the trenches, especially with a couple of young guys that we'll talk about. But I think that it is such a small sample size. But Maryland's defensive line has honestly been playing really well. The two freshmen on the edge, Zahir, Mathis, and Sidney Stewart, two special guys that are go on with that Maryland young freshman class that's honestly leading the way for a lot of this team. And then we brought in a ton of interior defensive line in that have been really good this year from the transfer portal. That is also a big part about this game, and seeing how we match up against, you mentioned Washington's offensive line that's been playing really well. I kind of like that idea of the trenches are going to be a big part of this game. And I think when you look at Maryland's defensive line, there's young guys, there's transfers, they've played well. This is the best group we played so far. And I said it on Locked on Terps, this is the first, I think, real test. I know Wisconsin was kind of our first Big Ten test, but still, they just have a lot of cracks. They just have a lot of things they need to work on. And I said, I think Washington's the first team that's going to challenge us in ways that we haven't seen so far this year.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And another name that I'm ashamed I didn't mention earlier is left guard John Mills, is somebody who, at starting as a true freshman, has been so impressive through the first month of his career. He doesn't even turn 18 for another couple of weeks, which is wild to think about. But I look at this Washington offense as a whole, and yeah, there were some setbacks against Ohio State, some self-inflicted injuries, some different things like that that really just put that offense out of rhythm. But this team all year on that side of the ball has been so explosive. They had almost 600 yards against Colorado State, get over 600 against an FCS opponent in UC Davis. And then you also go out and dominate the Apple Cup against Washington State before facing a much tougher test. And it showed that there still is a little bit of a ways to go before you're truly among the elite in the Big Ten. But there are so many things to like about what this Washington team brings to the table. And I think that one of the biggest things that I'm looking for in this game is another wide receiver to step up, because you look at this Maryland defense, it's 11th in the Big Ten right now in terms of passing yards allowed per game at a little bit over 200. And I think that that's something that Washington hasn't necessarily leaned all the way into just yet, because when you have a guy like Jonah Coleman and you're able to rush for over 300 yards in your first couple of games, you don't need to lean super heavily on Demond Williams, but he's someone who's proven to be such an efficient passer through the first 5-6 starts of his college career that in a game like this, if Maryland is going to just beef up the front seven and dare you to run the ball, I think that Demond is somebody who's been accurate and efficient enough through the first 5-6 games of his college, or 5-6 starts, of his college career to take advantage of the secondary, because like you said, it still is relatively untested. And I think that with a guy like Denzel Boston, with a tight end like Decker DeGraff, who I think can be a matchup nightmare for a lot of teams in the Big Ten, that there's a lot to just kind of dive into with this matchup that I'm really curious about.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying, because Maryland secondary, we haven't played any quality receivers or quality quarterback either. Like, Williams Jr. is the best quarterback we've played so far this year, and it's not close. Just to give Washington fans a little bit of background, the teams we've played so far is FAU, Northern Illinois, Towson, and then Wisconsin's backup quarterback. We didn't even get a chance to play Billy Edwards, who is our former quarterback. He ended up being hurt in that game, and so it's a concern for Maryland football. You talk about this secondary; they've been good, they've been pretty solid all year, but it's like, we just haven't seen really. And there's some youth there as well. Kid Kevin Humes, we're really excited about, the sophomore who had some troubles last year but was playing as a freshman. We've seen him take a big jump, and we have a couple transfers back there, Jamar Glasker, Dante Joyner, who've all played solidly well. But when we talk about that Washington receiving group, just don't know exactly how it's going to go. And we know Williams Jr. completes a high percentage of his throws. I think it was 75% I saw before. So I think it's going to be interesting to see the efficiency of the Washington offense against the Maryland's defense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's something where Demond can also beat you on the ground. He can also do so many different things with his legs that Ohio State was really good at countering. But in the first 3 games of the year, that wasn't quite the case. I look at a week before when Washington went on the road to Washington State. He was extremely effective on the ground where, sack adjusted yards. Demond had over 100 yards on the ground as well in that game. So I think that this is something where he just provides such an interesting threat. And I'm really curious to see what this linebacker group might do to deal with it. Are you going to try to walk down a safety and see if somebody's going to try to spy on Demond? Because that's something that he's done a really good job with, is, with zone reads and different things like that, giving the ball to Jonah Coleman, giving the ball to Adam Muhammad, Washington's second running back, who's been really efficient as well so far this year. And there's just a lot of options for Washington to go to on offense. So I'm really curious to see how this works out. And that kind of brings us to where we wanted to go with this, is some names that both fan bases need to know about in this game. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward was tight end Quentin Moore forcing a fumble on wide receiver Brandon Inniss in that Ohio State game, getting a fumble and a turnover like that in that part of the game, in that situation, with his daughter in the stands for the first time. It was an amazing moment for Quentin and his family, and for Washington as well, because as the Huskies continue to force turnovers, this defense, this special teams unit, is going to take a big step forward this year. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. We've also got a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. For Washington, Damon Williams delivered in a big way. He's been so impressive all season long, completed over 80% of his passes against the number one defense in the country. When the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Damon is on a streak. And just like Damon delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, promo period through November 18th. So Tre, as you look at this game, what is one name that you feel Washington fans need to know about?
Yeah, so I want to start with Maryland's receiving room in terms of one name that you guys have to know about. Octavian Smith. Senior receiver Malik Washington has really been throwing the ball a lot to this kid. I think he's one of our best offensive weapons over the past couple of games. He's kind of gone off, had a great game against Wisconsin, and he's now kind of the veteran in that group where it's kind of been cool to see how he's kind of continued to develop, played since freshman year at Maryland, and every single year has gotten better. He's kind of he's a smaller type of guy, but kind of your typical fast, explosive, small receiver, but he can make some big plays. And one thing about Maryland football is we're going to throw the ball a lot. So that's something else Washington fans know. We're going to throw the ball a lot. Malik Washington's going to have the ball a lot in his hands. We can't run the ball this year. And right now, Octavian Smith, I think, is our number one receiver, number one receiving talent for the Terps. But who should Maryland fans, who should we know? Who's the name that we should know about?
So when you talk about this passing attack, I want to give you a couple things here because I look on the outside and I love where you're going with this because Washington has a really big, long pair of corners on the outside in whether it's going to be Ephesians Prysock on one side and either Takario Davis, or if he's unable to go as he's been dealing with a rib injury for the last couple of weeks, Dylan Robinson, a true freshman on the other side. Those are names that I think you need to be aware of, but the guy whose name you really need to know in this matchup, in my opinion, is safety Alex McLaughlin. He's someone who came over from Northern Arizona last year and has just been so impressive. He led all defenders last week in the game against Ohio State with 13 tackles and is someone who just plays with his hair on fire. He's so much fun to watch where he's a really versatile safety where defensive coordinator Ryan Walters likes to move him down into the box, and he's really good at run fits and just doing different things to make sure he's in the right position at the right time. He had a pair of interceptions against Washington State, including one he took back for a 47-yard pick six. And I think that he's someone who can be a real X factor in this game because as we just kind of look at Malik Washington, one thing that Ryan Walters said about him earlier in the week is he compared him as a physical specimen to Cam Newton, where he said, this is a guy who's really hard to bring down. And when he's able to get outside of the pocket and get on the move, he's really, really hard to tackle. And McLaughlin is the kind of guy where if that is something that he has to do, where the coverage is good downfield and Malik Washington does want to roll out, I feel like that's going to be the guy who we see more often than not chasing him down because Washington has gone to a lot of three safety looks over the last couple of weeks after losing a linebacker in Buda Alukta to injury. And I think that Alex is the guy who was already a starter and already a really important part of this defense. But as the weeks go on, and as we continue to see him get acclimated in his first year playing in the Big Ten, he's someone who this coaching staff is throwing more and more and more at, and he just continues to respond.
Right. Yeah. I was doing kind of some research, pre-research about Washington's defense side of the ball, and McLaughlin is somebody that I was reading a lot about. He was popping up a lot into the headlines for this game. And it's interesting the point you kind of bring up about Malik Washington. He's been tough to bring down. And I definitely think that's something else that's been a big part of Maryland's success is he just hasn't gotten sacked a lot this year. And I think our offensive line hasn't really been tested. I'm just still not sure about that side. But I think when we switch over to the defensive side of the ball for Maryland football, I mentioned it earlier, but these two freshman edges are just something else right now for Maryland football. We're just not used to getting guys like this on the outside in terms of the edge position that are just freaks coming off the edge. And Sidney Stewart was an underrated recruit, didn't play his senior year, but now arguably I think ESPN ranked him the number 5 ranked freshmen in the so far right now playing in college football. He's 4 sacks on the year, has had a sack in every single game, and he's just causing chaos. When you see him come off the edge, you kind of understand why he's so productive. He's honestly a freak coming off the edge, and that's somebody that Washington fans definitely want to watch out for, which is going to be a really cool, interesting battle with Washington's offensive line that's been pretty good. But when you talk about Maryland having some success on defense, it starts with those 2 freshman edge rushers, and I've been kind of waiting for their welcome to college football moment, but it just hasn't happened yet. So you kind of wonder if they slow down against a group like Washington's.
So you bring up a great point here, because I've been so impressed with both of those guys. And this is one of the things that when I look at this matchup, Washington, like I said a little bit earlier, Washington's left tackle Carver Willis is also questionable for this game. He went down in the second quarter with a knee injury against Ohio State. It didn't look too severe, and Jedd Fisch has been just kind of somewhat coy with his status when we got a chance to speak with him on Monday. No matter who is on the left side, whether it be Carver Willis or backup Maximus McCree, former Maryland guy, I'm interested in that side of the ball. But I look at right tackle, and Drew Azzopardi has been so sturdy this season. He's a name that just in this matchup, I'm glad you wanted to talk about the trenches, because Drew Azzopardi has been one of the most improved tackles in the country this season. According to Pro Football Focus, he's one of the lowest graded players at his position last year. I think if not the lowest in the Big Ten for people who started every single game. But we have seen him go through a complete transformation this offseason. He changed his body, got more flexible, got more comfortable in the scheme, and he's only given up 1 pressure so far this season through Washington's first 4 games, and that includes the Ohio State game. So I've been really impressed with what he's brought to the table so far this year. A lot of Jonah Coleman's big runs have come through that right side, whether it be off right guard, off right tackle. And he's someone who, as he continues to develop, he's a solid enough athlete to make things happen, and you can run behind him a lot, but he's also just been so sturdy in pass protection. And if Washington is not able to protect Damon Williams super well, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way that he decides to scramble and get out of the pocket and roll to his right frequently in this contest.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense about the Washington's offense line. That's going to be a heavyweight battle, I think, when I'm not used to kind of saying Maryland has some pass rushers that can get after. And then one more name on the Maryland side of the ball, I think, who's had a really kind of complex year is Dorian Fleming, the tight end. Transferred in, a lot of people right away, he popped right away for Maryland football, looked like our best receiving talent, had a couple of really good games to start the season. And I mentioned him as kind of the, not for say an X factor for Maryland football, but I think he arguably at times is one of our best receivers. And that's another name, I think, in terms of Maryland throwing the football a lot, a guy that could really end up having a big game for Maryland football is the tight end Dorian Fleming. Malik Washington, like I said, early on this season, he really liked throwing him the ball. Over the past 2 games against Wisconsin, against Towson, it slowed down for Dorian Fleming. But going into the year, a lot of people thought he could lead our team in receiving yards and catches, and it hasn't ended up being that way because of the last 2 weeks. But the way the year started, he was a guy that was really big time. So that's going to be interesting to see. I don't want to say what Dorian Fleming shows up, but how many touches does Dorian Fleming get? Because he's a threat in the offense that could really be big time.
So I love where you're going with that. I also wanted to make sure I discussed at least one of Washington's pass catchers, because after sophomore wide receiver Rasheed Williams got hurt earlier on in the year, he's going to miss this game with a collarbone injury. Washington has been looking for a second receiver to step up. Now, they went out and got senior Omari Evans from Penn State in the transfer portal, and he's been solid after missing the first 2 games with an injury. But Washington has had some of these young guys, some of these true freshmen, step up. And one guy who's been insanely impressive since the moment he stepped on campus is wide receiver Desmond Roebuck. He took over for Williams after he got hurt and just has an incredible feel for the game. He's one of those guys who's got great hands. He catches everything just thrown in his vicinity. Even though he's undersized, he's great at going up and high pointing the football, which is so much fun to watch. But at the same point, he is someone who, when I watch him, again, he just has a great feel for the game. If Damon Williams is trying to get out of the pocket, he's the guy who can go out and make those diving catches, but also just knows where the soft spot in the zone is, just knows where he needs to be and when he needs to be there, and has become the 3rd leading receiver on this Washington team behind Denzel Boston and Jonah Coleman. And he's someone where Like you said, Tre, this is going to be the biggest test for Maryland in the secondary, especially with what Washington is bringing to the table. He's someone who I'm just curious to see what this is going to look like with this cross-country road trip for Washington. And that also just kind of brings us to one more thing that we wanted to get to in this incredible crossover is your team wins if. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. So Tre, I am not one for the score predictions. Let's say I'm just the biggest jinx in the world, so I stopped doing that a long time ago. But when I do these crossovers, one thing that I love to do is your team wins if. So if we're sitting here chatting at the end of the game and Maryland comes away with a victory, how do you think that happened?
I think Maryland wins, and I've said this a couple times on Locked On Terps. I think Maryland wins if we can stop the run game, the quarterback run game, and the kid Jonah Coleman as well, who's had a big year, averaging 6.5 yards per carry. Looks like a really good back. And then obviously Williams Jr. rushes the ball a lot, and he's a big rusher himself. And to me, I think the biggest challenge for Maryland's defense over the last couple of years has been stopping the run. And I think if Washington's able to run the ball, and that's going to open up things in the pass game, and it's going to get really challenging for Maryland's defense. But I think if Maryland can somewhat limit the run game, then I think we have a good chance of winning the game. I just think it'll be really difficult if Williams is running all over the place, and then all of a sudden the Jonah kid is running as well, having some big runs. I mean, he has 9 touchdowns on the year. He's clearly a big threat. And compared to Maryland's run game, that's been pretty terrible all year. I just think it's something that if Maryland can stop, I think we have an opportunity to win the game. Now, it's going to be hard to contain Williams. It's going to be hard to stop Jonah. But if the defensive line can step up and play well again like they have, even though in this kind of poor sample size that we have, I think Maryland has a good chance of winning the game.
And I love where you're going with that, because Maryland, by the numbers at least, has had a really strong rush defense this year. It's number 7 in the Big Ten, allowing 92.2 yards per game on the ground. So I love that. And I think that for Washington, as I look at the other side of this, it's always great to establish the run. It's always great to do those things, but I wanted to go to the other side of the ball because I don't think that many Husky fans have a lot of questions at the offense right now. I think with some injuries, there certainly could be some things that pop up. But the one thing for me that I think is going to be really important if Washington is able to come away with the victory is generating turnovers. This is something they did a good job of in the Apple Cup. They were able to get 3 in that game. You won the turnover battle against Ohio State too, 1-0. So you've been able to go out there and do that while protecting the ball on your own side. But I look at this, and Malik Washington has been excellent at protecting the ball this season, especially given the amount of times he's thrown it so far this year, like you were saying. I think if Washington wants to find a way to come out on top in this game, you need to find a way to win the turnover battle, whether it be a strip sack, whether it be getting him to throw an interception or 2. I know that Maryland's receivers have like 14 or 15 drops this season. I know that something that Pro Football Focus had out there. I look at this game and it's trying to take advantage of those miscues, because Washington's pass rush has been a little bit lacking so far this year. And a lot of that is due to an injury to Zach Durfee, which came down against Ohio State. But they also they've been doing a good job of getting into the backfield. I know they pressured Colorado State's quarterback, Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, at a 50% clip. They were able to do a similar job against Zevi Eckhouse against Washington State. I'm throwing out the UC Davis game since that was an FCS opponent. But they've done a good job at getting after the quarterback, just not turning it into sacks. And this is the game where if you're not able to do that, you need to find a way to take advantage of a tip pass or just a bad throw, because they are going to come from every single quarterback. And I'm just curious to see what that might look like in this game.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with some of that assessment for sure. And I think something else, if we switch over to the other side of the ball, for Maryland, talking about another thing, I think if Maryland wins, I've stopped saying if Maryland runs the ball, we can win or we can play better or whatever the case is. I've said that way too many times. I decided to stop. I'm just going to assume that we're not going to be able to run the ball because we haven't been able to do it against anybody so far this year. Out of Towson, Northern Illinois, like, look at the numbers. There's no rusher on our team that's been able to generate anything. So I'm not going to sit here and be like if Maryland rushes the ball well, because I don't think that's something that's going to happen. But I think if Malik Washington, obviously if he plays well, but so far he hasn't had too many challenges in terms of stepping back or having too many freshman mistakes, has only had one turnover on the year. And you talked about the turnovers for Washington. So I want to generate kind of off of that idea. And I think if Malik Washington doesn't turn over the ball and doesn't have any freshman mistakes, which I talked about with the freshman edge rushers, I'm like, when's the kind of the freshman moment coming? And same thing for Malik Washington. I've been kind of waiting for that. If it doesn't come this game and Malik Washington continues to take care of the ball while also still throwing the ball down the field to some of our receivers like Shalik Knotts, I hadn't mentioned, he's been having a really good year. Jalil Farouk, if he can still throw the ball down the field, take some shots against Washington like he has while not turning over the ball, I think Maryland wins the game. And I'm not saying I'm confident in that because I think Washington's defense is the best unit we've seen so far this year. But I just think that Malik Washington's awesome. And I think if he continues to look like a senior or junior, not a freshman, and doesn't have a freshman mistake, which I'm kind of expecting to happen, I think Maryland wins the game.
So I love where you're going with that, because this is something that I've been really intrigued by with this matchup as well, with defensive coordinator Ryan Walters, where a lot of this season has been, and I know a lot of Big Ten fans know him from his time at Purdue as the head coach and then Illinois before then as the defensive coordinator. What you see is what you get. You know you're going to see a lot of press man, a lot of 5-man fronts that just turns into a blitz, by matter of fact. And I'm curious to see what he's going to try to do to confuse Malik Washington in this game, because we saw him do a good job of that against Julian Sand. This Husky team has not allowed a lot of explosive plays so far this year. So when I look at the back end of the defense, I think that we might see some different things, because he talked about it on Tuesday during his press conference, saying that he installed a lot for Ohio State, just a lot of different kinds of coverages. And I don't know how much of that is with just him trying to play without Tacario Davis and trying to do different things without one of his top players in the lineup, and how much of that is I know I need to change to continue to evolve and get better as a defensive play caller. So I love where you're going with the freshman moments, freshman mistakes, because yeah, every player does have them. And the fact that Malik Washington hasn't to this point has been really, really impressive. I've had a lot of fun watching him. And as I look at this matchup, it's going to be tough for Washington to, traverse 3 time zones and make this happen, because they struggled in that department last year. And yeah, half of that was playing teams that wound up in the college football playoff, but this is a very different Washington team. And I think that they do have a solid shot to win this game. I know the spread is like 6.5 right now, according to our good friends over at FanDuel. And as I look at this matchup, I think this is going to be a closer game than some people think. And I think that Washington has all the talent to get it done, but going on the road is certainly not going to be easy.
Yeah, I agree with that point. And I've been thinking about the spread a lot in the 6.5, and I just want to lean Maryland's side with that number. But I just have some concerns with us still not. I've been trying not to jump the horn. I know things look good so far, but I just can't get over that. I just don't think Wisconsin's a very good football team this year. So I'm still trying to figure out where we stand on things, but I think this is the test. I think this game against Washington is going to show a whole lot, and we're going to understand a lot more of what Maryland's about this year.
All right, before we get out of here, I'm going to put you on the spot here really, really fast. Got 2 questions for you. Number 1, Do you have a bold prediction for this game? It's a Locked On Huskies tradition. It can be a stat. It can be, oh, this guy's going to get, three touchdowns, whatever it might be. Do you have any of those?
I do. My bold prediction is it's going to be a high scoring game. I think both offenses are going to get it done. And what I mentioned first about the quarterback battle, I'm going to say my bold prediction is both quarterbacks end up throwing for over 300 yards in this game. And I think both quarterbacks are going to get it done. And we're going to see a battle in that way. A very fun, fast paced game. That's my bold prediction. I think we're going to watch a quarterback battle that we all want to see.
This is great because one of my bold predictions on Locked On Huskies was that Damon Williams throws for 300 passing yards. So you and I are on a great wavelength today. Second one. Like I said, I don't do them because I'm a jinx, but I don't know if you've done one over on Locked On Terps just yet. Do you have a score prediction for this game?
Yeah, I'll keep going off of my point of thinking it'll be a high scoring game. I think I lean Washington just because and just 100% honest, because I just haven't seen Maryland. I'm just not 100% confident in the teams we played so far this year. And you guys have been tested, obviously, last week against Ohio State. I'm going to go, but I think Maryland covers the 6.5. I'm going to go 35-38. A lot of points being scored, an offensive type of game. And I think both offenses play well. There's some defensive question marks that come out of it. So I'm going to go 35-38 Washington, but Maryland covers.
Tre, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to all our everydayers out there for tuning in. And if you want to get more from both of our channels, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel through content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, jump right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you after the game.